You can change the logical flow of statements within a place, SQL block with a number of control structures. This lesson addresses 4 types of place, SQL control structures: conditional constructs with the if statement, case statement, loop control structures. The structure of a place, SQL if statement is similar to the structure of if statements in other procedural languages. It allows place, SQL to perform actions selectively based on conditions. Else if is a keyword that introduces a Boolean expression. If the first condition yields false or null, the else if keyword introduces additional conditions. Else introduces the default clause that is executed only if none of the earlier predicates, introduced by if and else if, are true. The tests are executed in sequence so that a later predicate that might be true is preempted by an earlier predicate that is true. End if marks the end of an if statement. In the slide, you see an example of a simple if statement with the then clause. The v_myAge variable is initialized to 10. The condition for the if statement returns true because v_myAge is less than 11. Therefore, the control reaches the then clause. An else clause is added to the code from the previous slide. The condition has not changed, but the value of the variable has changed from 10 to 31. The condition now evaluates to false. Recall that statements in the then clause are executed only if the condition returns true. In this case, the condition returns false and the control moves to the else statement. You can have multiple else if clauses in an if statement and a final else clause. The example in the slide illustrates the following characteristics of these clauses. The else if clauses can have conditions, unlike the else clause. You can check additional conditions through the else if clauses if the condition in the if clause evaluates to false or null. The condition for else if should be followed by the then clause, which is executed if the condition for else if returns true. When you have multiple else if clauses, if the first condition is false or null, the control shifts to the next else if clause. Conditions are evaluated one by one from the top. If all conditions are false or null, the statements in the else clause are executed. The final else clause is optional. In the example in the slide, the variable v_myAge is declared but not initialized. The condition in the if statement returns null rather than true or false. In such a case, the control goes to the else statement. You can use a case expression to return a result from many alternatives based on the value of a selector. The selector is followed by one or more when clauses that are checked sequentially. Whenever the value of the selector equals the value of a when expression, the statements in the when clause are executed and that result is returned. In the previous example, you saw a single test expression, the v_grade variable. The when clause compares a value against this test expression. In searched case statements, you do not have a test expression. Instead, the when clause contains an expression that results in a Boolean value. The same example is rewritten in this slide to show searched case statements. Recall the use of the if statement. You may include n number of place, SQL statements in the then clause and also in the else clause. Similarly, you can include statements in the case statement, which is more readable compared to multiple if and else if statements. How a case expression differs from a case statement. A case expression evaluates a condition and returns a value, whereas a case statement evaluates a condition and performs an action. A case statement can be a complete place, SQL block. When you are working with null values, you can avoid some common mistakes by keeping the following rules in mind. Simple comparisons involving nulls always yield null. Applying the logical operator not to a null yields null. If the condition yields null in conditional control statements, its associated sequence of statements is not executed. You can build a simple Boolean condition by combining number, character, or date expressions with comparison operators. You can build a complex Boolean condition by combining simple Boolean conditions with the logical operators and, or not. The logical operators are used to check the Boolean variable values and return true, false, or null. In the logic tables shown in the slide, false takes precedence in an AND condition, and true takes precedence in an OR condition. And returns true only if both of its operands are true. OR returns false only if both of its operands are false. Null and true always evaluates to null because it is not known whether the second operand evaluates to true. Loops are programming language constructs that are used to execute a set of statements repeatedly until an exit condition is reached. It is mandatory to have an exit condition in a loop, otherwise, the loop executes for infinite number of iterations. Place, SQL provides 3 types of loop structures. Basic loop that performs repetitive actions till the exit condition is met. For loops that perform iterative actions based on a count, while loops that perform iterative actions based on a condition. The simplest form of a loop statement is the basic loop, which encloses a sequence of statements between the loop and end loop keywords. Each time the flow of execution reaches the end loop statement, the exit condition is checked. If the exit condition evaluates to false, the statements in the loop are repeated. A basic loop allows execution of its statements at least once, even if the exit condition is already met upon entering the loop. Without the exit statement, the loop would be infinite. The basic loop example shown in the slide is defined as follows. Insert 3 new location IDs for the CA country code in the city of Montreal. Note: a basic loop allows execution of its statements until the exit when condition is met. If the condition is placed in the loop such that it is not checked until after the loop statements execute, the loop executes at least once. However, if the exit condition is placed at the top of the loop, before any of the other executable statements, and if that condition is true, the loop exits and the statements never execute. You can use the while loop to repeat a sequence of statements until the controlling condition is no longer true. The condition is evaluated at the start of each iteration. The loop terminates when the condition is false or null. If the condition is false or null at the start of the loop, no further iterations are performed. Thus, it is possible that none of the statements inside the loop are executed. In the example in the slide, 3 new location IDs for the CA country code and the city of Montreal are added. With each iteration through the while loop, a counter, v_counter, is incremented. If the number of iterations is less than or equal to the number 3, the code within the loop is executed and a row is inserted into the locations table. After v_counter exceeds the number of new locations for this city and country, the condition that controls the loop evaluates to false and the loop terminates. For loops have the same general structure as the basic loop. You can use a for loop when you know the number of iterations that a given set of place, SQL statements should execute. Counter is an implicitly declared integer whose value automatically increases or decreases if the reverse keyword is used, by 1 on each iteration of the loop until the upper or lower bound is reached. Reverse causes the counter to decrement with each iteration from the upper bound to the lower bound. Note: the lower bound is still referenced first. Lower_bound upper_bound. Specifies the lower bound for the range of counter values. Specifies the upper bound for the range of counter values. You have already learned how to insert 3 new locations for the CA country code in the city of Montreal by using the basic loop and the while loop. The example in this slide shows how to achieve the same by using the for loop. Note: the lower and upper bounds of a loop statement do not need to be numeric literals. They can be expressions that convert to numeric values. A basic loop allows the execution of its statement at least once, even if the condition is already met upon entering the loop. Without the exit statement, the loop would be infinite. You can use the while loop to repeat a sequence of statements until the controlling condition is no longer true. The condition is evaluated at the start of each iteration. The loop terminates when the condition is false. If the condition is false at the start of the loop, no further iterations are performed. For loops have a control statement before the loop keyword to determine the number of iterations that the place, SQL performs. Use a for loop if the number of iterations is predetermined. You can nest the for, while, and basic loops within one another. The termination of a nested loop does not terminate the enclosing loop unless an exception is raised. However, you can label loops and exit the outer loop with the exit statement. Label names follow the same rules as the other identifiers. A label is placed before a statement, either on the same line or on a separate line. White space is insignificant in all place, SQL parsing except inside literals. Label basic loops by placing the label before the word loop within label delimiters, less than label greater than. In for and while loops, place the label before for or while. In the example in the slide, there are 2 loops. The outer loop is identified by the label less than outer_loop greater than, and the inner loop is identified by the label less than inner_loop greater than. The identifiers are placed before the word loop within label delimiters, less than label greater than. The inner loop is nested within the outer loop. The label names are included after the end loop statements for clarity. The continue statement enables you to transfer control within a loop to a new iteration or to leave the loop. Many other programming languages have this functionality. With the Oracle Database 11 grams release, Place SQL also offers this functionality. Before the Oracle Database 11 grams release, you could code a Workaround by using Boolean variables and conditional statements to simulate the continue. Programmatic functionality. In some cases, the workarounds are less efficient. In the example in the slide, there are two assignments that use the v_total variable. 1. The first assignment is executed for each of the 10 iterations of the loop. 2. The second assignment is executed only for the first 5 iterations of the loop. The continue statement transfers control within the loop back to the beginning of the loop for a new iteration, so for the last 5 iterations of the loop, the second total assignment is not executed.